tonight. I've been working with them on the idea of reconfiguring the community center to make it functional yet cost efficient and still be a centerpiece for the community park. What we're looking for under this current council option proposal, and we can speak to the entire plan as we've kind of worked through where we are, is to kind of do, we've broken it out into phases to look at it. So we're looking at phase one of the plan because, again, from Joe's standpoint from engineering, there are certain things that aren't really clear until we get the building open somewhat. Again, the idea of making it an open air facilities, an open air structure so that it can be utilized throughout the summer months and, you know, even into from the early spring to the late fall, and anything else depending on whether or not someone wanted to temporarily heat it themselves or something to that effect, is there. So the front page is a cost analysis that Joe has worked with both contractors to get some prospective pricing on, and again, none of it's to this point in time been bid out, but it is, you know, again, some ballpark numbers that he used to put together a cost analysis for some not to exceed as we were to walk forward. So we propose under this plan, and I know we've talked about it. I know some of the council members have been out to the facility with us to kind of go through and see some of the things that we were talking about. And I'm sorry when the email went through that none of the pictures scanned in properly. So the problem is trying to move anywhere forward on this has always been the cash flow situation because the building authority funds were in general fund being utilized at that point in time in some way, shape, or form. Now that the separation is here, distinctly we have building authority funds that have been captured and collected. Most specifically, I think we've got a little bit of a payment from last year because the Honeywell payment fell off. We had probably a year before we had a transition in one payment to another payment, the way the bonds all worked out to where it picked up and kind of increased a little bit there. So there is a surplus of fund balance through Building Authority. Talking with Pat McGow and Bond Council and trying to figure out Building Authority funds and what we're actually to do. The law is pretty vague, it's kind of thin to this, and we're one of the few communities in the state that still operate a building authority.
How much do we have?
1.4.
It's on this?
Yeah. Budget. Well, your budget, the last one I just passed out. So we're now, obviously the cash has been set aside, it's in its own account, it's not there, that's not presenting itself as an issue. And we've kind of finalized some ideas moving forward for the plan and open air facility that we'd like to walk through in phases, because that way each one we look at, get input from council, get input, you know, community and everything else as to how we want to move forward. So phase one would be a demolition of the front office space, which was also the child care, the back parks maintenance space, and the locker rooms that were attached to the pool or off the pool side, and the concession area. That would be phase one of the demolition, and then
all the related environmental remediation.
Right, there is, we did do remediation, we did do an environmental with Wade Trim. We originally started this. It was their recommendation that we get together with these guys and try to move forward. Again, because you don't really know what you're bidding out, so we're not, you know, we didn't propose a bid out of doing this project because the scope of it could be so all-inclusive you wouldn't. The idea was more of a kind of a design build, you know, factor moving forward, and why we have been able. So Mr. Bldg and Williams have put a lot of time and energy into this up to date to kind of bring the idea somewhat to a workable plan. The other part of this has kind of been a late ad, and we haven't talked, put this forward, that is the splash pad. It's the multicolored pad to replace the pool area. The reason and point behind the splash pad versus a different type of aquatic feature, there's no treatment of the water, it's direct city water. There's no continued usage of water, so you don't have to fill up 40,000 gallons of pool water and then treat it and heat it and everything else. And these would all be sensor based. So you'd step on a pad, the water would spray, and it would shut off. So you're only using the consumption there, and it won't stay on. It's a 10-second. You can set it how you want it, but it's a 10-second sensor basis, and it's straight city water coming in, and be cold and refreshing.
In season.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and again, the shutdown is no more than the same thing as shutting down a sprinkler line. Blow out the line, make sure it's not there, and you're winterized for the year.
And what is
so
the material there? Is that like a rubber?
Yes. You want to speak to that at all?
Right, that's exactly right.
And there's a water park like that in West City Hall.
Yeah.
Children's play.
Never did it when I
Fenced
did.
in one.
Wyandotte has one downtown, it's a little bit different, I think. And,
But that material's pretty consistent from park to park. It's not rubberized.
Romulus Recreation.
Romulus Rec Center.
And more specifically on these funds too, you said that they weren't very specific, but we can't just move this money and
Well,
start
I said
paying other.
the law is kind of gray as to the use or the purpose of the funds when it means how you're collecting them. The law kind of says with the building authority that the building authority can enter into the debt, the bond issuance. The city then enters into agreement with the authority to lease that space for the next 75 years or whatever it might be, thereby putting the faith and credit of the city behind the payment of that through tax assessment. That's where the TVA authority millage comes from. It's set by the bond issuance that the building authority has. So we, the city, don't go out and get the bond issuance, the building authority does. We don't particularly go out and ask the residents for the millage. We assess it because it's our agreement as a city with them. So the bond issuances, in a way I was trying to understand it myself, and Rick with this historical knowledge of any of it can jump in at some point. But what I was trying to understand with Dean for 3 years is, again, much of what we talk about with building grounds. When you look at the law, it kind of basically states that you can issue the assessment to pay down bond indebtedness and the maintenance of those buildings. So the question was, what was in the bond issuances that still existed out there? The 01, 03, 04, 05, the series as they kept rolling over. Now I believe that a couple administrations ago, they were maybe a little bit more crafty and worded into the bond issuances the idea of, and any other projects on any other city buildings or properties, so that they could then potentially utilize that wherever. Doesn't mean they ever did a project within any of the bond funds, but they would do it. So it's kind of been, kind of stretched, although there's no real language according to Pat McGow. So when I asked him where we would be with this particular fund balance now, it's to pay down, use it to pay down debt service on the current bond issuances, so we could divide it over multiple years and use it for the assessment as well and bring it down, or do a project. It's something related in the building authority. Obviously, the first renovation or project that was done with the community center is kind of the basis for the building authority. I think it was one of the first ones. Mr. Bulow